Welcome to Skechcraft, the podcast for art, design, and process junkies. I'm Rob Duenas, art director for Game Fan Magazine and Artist Esquire. This is an unedited podcast, which means that there is some cursing from time to time, so please be aware. Thanks for listening, and here we go. Hey y'all, Rob D here. So, I'm going to do something a little different. These are called sketch rants, and basically, various topics appear from time to time while I'm live streaming or talking to my artist friends or while I'm sitting in my room bitching to myself endlessly for hours and days and months and weeks, not in that order. And so what I've come to is I can either shove this stuff into a show or try to separate it a little bit. And being that this is sort of like a kind of a soapbox, I've decided to pull it into its own thing, sort of in between the normal episodes. So these are more for the art elite, people that are really interested in sort of my opinion. I'm sorry. So you be forewarned, if I offend anybody out there, so I'm sorry. Not really. Look, there's really nothing much I can do about this. As a matter of fact, I probably stand to shoot myself in the foot by even saying any of this stuff, because it just may become sort of a divisive thing. However, I'm a pretty fair-minded individual and open to debate anytime. So if you guys have any comments, concerns, approvals, disapprovals, feel free to email me at rob@sketchcraft.com, CRAFT.com. And if I get a nice email, I'll definitely read it on a future sketch rant and debate, yada yada, so and so, and get that going. So let's get to today's sketch rant. This is going to go on for about 20 minutes or so, so I'm probably going to break this up in two parts. Art myths. Myths. Art mythological ideas. So what is an art myth? So what I'm trying to get to is, while I'm working lately on, mostly on livestream, livestream.com/sketchrob or sketchcraft.com to join the stream, various consistent, does that even make sense? Consistent topics pop up while I'm drawing and coloring. And I've sort of noticed a trend following these sort of comments. Things like, how many layers do you use? And if you use more than one layer, I heard you're not professional. And can you draw for reals? No, just pretend art here, people. Things like this. So what software do you use? Why don't you use Psy? Why don't you use Illustrator? You should use Painter. That's the best software. You don't listen to good music. You listen to great music. Do you have to listen to? Why don't you listen to music? I can't hear the music. Are you playing more? You should play more music. What school did you go to? Do you have to go to school? Things like this. And I've sort of noticed. I sort of want to set sort of the bar for my opinion for everyone to follow. So let's get right down the list. First off, I draw a lot of my professional work in Photoshop. I draw and color in Photoshop. The reason why I went to drawing digitally for a lot of my professional work isn't because I can't draw for, quote unquote, with my fingers, right? For reals, RLZ, right? For the internet inclined. I started drawing digitally because I was getting severe carpal tunnel. I tend to draw really rough, but my cleanup is always very clean. And that make any sense? My finals, my finished work is clean. To get to that clean point, I basically take my art that I would usually do a sketch. I'd scan it, reset the composition in Photoshop. And I used to print all my artwork out onto 11x17 boards. I own $1,000 worth of 11 or oversized printers, so I can print all my art onto the Comicbook boards or oversized paper. And then I would do that because I hate lightboarding. I've never liked lightboarding, even since high school. Hold on, I got some soda. Get a little sugar right here. So I've never enjoyed lightboarding. So I would draw everything on these boards. I'd print it out and draw it so I can keep it clean. And what that also allowed me to do was to basically just illustrate my rough just enough so I could see the shapes and the basic details, and basically produce my entire drawing in the finished form. faster. So I can get right to the details and all the construction is there on the board. And when I would erase, it would leave my initial image. And that was a really, really great process. The problem is I press too freaking hard when I draw. I have been combating this all my life. I do not understand why I do it. I can be in a good mood, a bad mood, or whatever mood. I just tend to press hard when I draw. The more I focus, the harder I press. And what was occurring, no matter how hard I tried, was I was getting wicked, I don't know if you call it carpal tunnel. I call it carpal tunnel. I don't have a better word for it. But my knuckles and my forearm were burning to the point where I was just about turning 30. I'm like, wow, I can finally really start my career. I have enough skill to, wow people. Everything's going great. And now I can't draw. I actually couldn't draw. I had to stop drawing for like 3 months. And I was scared, I didn't know what to do. And I had just signed on to draw some interior work. We were going to kick up the Death Junior comic at the time, the new series that we were producing. And I had to be able to produce finished work. People had already spent money on this, and I didn't know what to do. I had been aware of the Cintiq monitor since 2002 when it was first announced. The first ones were announced. I used the initial Cintiq at the 2003 SIGGRAPH, which I got to go and volunteer at college. And I felt that, I thought that might be the future of drawing digitally. I thought that might be really good until I used it. And I did not like drawing. First, it was extremely thick. The new versions are far thinner. And it was really dark. And I could not get over drawing on a smooth, glassy surface. And the screen was warm. So it was weird to me. And the pens were really thick at the time. So, and it was $5,000, I think. Yeah, at the time it was $5,000. And I was like, well, that's an awful lot of money to be spending on, like, not having something. And I really wasn't comfortable with it. So, when I was presented with this issue of the carpal tunnel, I said, well, I got to figure this out now. So I took some money that I had, and I went and bought a new Cintiq, the version 2s. And I'm like, this is it. This is my last-ditch effort. I have to make this work. So I bought the Cintiq, I got it shipped, and I got to tell you, for about almost a year, I'd say for the first 3 months, nothing. I mean, not a damn thing was legible. What I was doing was I would sort of draw until my wrist hurt, and I'd stop and try to finish the rest digitally, using the pen tools and stuff like that. And that got really annoying. I mean, I was not used to drawing and having my hand in the way in the computer, like I had color and stuff. I got very comfortable working from an Intuos pad to the monitor. I had to keep working at it. So that was 2008. Up until about the fall of 2010, it didn't really look very good. I want to say it wasn't until somewhere around 2010 I sort of figured out how to make it work for me. I did enough with the stuff. Now, people would disagree. My employers would disagree and go, no, this stuff looked brilliant. But not how I was happy with it. It didn't have the energy. It didn't have whatever it was. It didn't have that something I was looking for. Now, I think it looks pretty good. And it's just a matter of how clean or how sketchy I want it. Some of my recent Richie Rich stuff I keep sketchy. I can do more clean. Just takes longer. Sort of the speed. But to get that to work was my only way out. Without this, I would not be able to produce over half of what I do. And I'm not producing fast enough, people. Like, honestly, I'm not producing fast enough. So that's it. That's my only way around. So when people say, oh, you draw on the computer, you must be doing that because you can't draw for reals. Well, that's not true. All my commission work for reals is pencil and watercolor and ink and one shot, one try, I do the composition digitally because I like to use Photoshop as a compositional tool. If Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and all those guys had Photoshop back in the day, they'd be using this shit too, people. Don't delude yourself, okay? They developed oils and whole new ways of painting to sort of bring their work to life. Go study art history someday. So the other thing I want to get to is when they bring up, a lot of times I get how many layers do you use? I see a lot of layers in your artwork. So, I've been hearing this my whole art career, basically, that I use too many layers. I don't think about it. I tend to use Photoshop actually the way I would in real life. When I illustrate, I draw very light, and then I would erase with a gum eraser and go back over and clean up. Well, that's 2 or 3 layers technically right there. If I'm painting, I would prime the board with a fixative, then that's a layer to lock in the pencils, and then I would go and do my base, colors and highlights. That's a layer, let that dry. And then I would add stippling and splatters, and that's a layer. And then I might add another layer of color, let it dry, and another layer of color. I'm doing the same thing. In Photoshop, because it's a computer and not real life, and the colors don't blend and dry as they would in real life, I tend to use opacities. I found, for some reason, I think, visually speaking, it looks more natural or more pleasing to my eye when I use... instead of 80% of a layer, I'll use a 40 and a 20 or a 30% on top. So I'll use a 40% of a layer, I'll duplicate it and use a 20. I'll scale it down. So I'm actually using 60% color, and to me it looks more darker and more natural than just using straight 60 or 80% on one layer. I tried to use the layers as the way I would glaze things in real life. I don't think about it. I try to explain to people, how many times do you think about erasing? When you're drawing, do you think about erasing? How many times did you erase on that drawing? Did they making you less or more professional? The art myth behind the layers thing is that a lot of people go, well, I heard if you only use one layer, that makes you more professional. Look, I've worked in actual art departments, on a limited, but I've worked in a few, okay? And I have never, my entire life, had an art director or a sales rep come over, look over my computer and ask me how many freaking layers I'm using, okay? They only care about the work you produce. When they go and make movies like Transformers and Avatar and Harry Potter and stuff like that, there are many, many, many layers. There's green screen effects, there's plate photography, there's all sorts of things. When you play a video game, there's shaders on top of shaders on top of shaders, creating that realistic environment, right? Go look up DirectX 11 and see all available shaders that are available in PC computing and gaming. Matter of fact, probably look at DirectX 9, since pretty much all the game systems use DirectX 9 as a component. You're going to see all these shaders. When you look at 3D imagery, there's all these shaders. I use layers like you would shaders. And for some reason, the internet, I don't know, maybe they were watching Gnome on DVDs or some jerkwad on YouTube's telling everybody that they need to do everything once. And maybe that person got it to work right. But I'm not concerned with trying to be anybody else but me. I'm only concerned with getting the image across that's either in my head or on the goddamn comp that got approved. That has to be done. It has to be done at the level of detail and quality that I demand. And whatever it takes for me to get there, I get there and do it. I'm drawing for reals, digitally or not. I knew going into doing digital art, I would get that stigma a lot. I'd get those little complaints. That, oh, Rob has to have the computer. Rob has to do this. Rob has to do... I don't care. I've been hearing this my whole life. Since I was 13, I used to rotate the page when I would draw, right? And I used to have the elderly people, like at family gatherings or something like that, would come by and say, oh, you're rotating the page. A real artist, true artist, would not have to rotate the page. And I would sort of buy into that. I'd align the page straight and try to draw the character, at a certain angle. And my hand would move in weird ways. And it was uncomfortable. And once I actually learned, quote unquote, how to really draw, you want to draw with your whole arm and not your wrist, theoretically speaking. I sort of found out why that was. I found out that a lot of people who were giving me art advice weren't artists, never made a living making art. Weren't artists giving me this advice. It was people who had an impression of artists and kind of knew of artists and had a brother or a stepson or an uncle or a friend who worked at Disney or an architect or some bullshit like that telling me exactly what to do and how to do it. And it got in the way. I wasted a lot of years trying to live up to the impression of what it was like to be an artist rather than just getting along with making the fucking art. So my advice, please people, please, if you're an artist out there, right, and you're hearing all these things, okay, you need to just let it go, okay? You only compete with yourself. You are not in competition with Greg Capullo, Alex Ross, Monet, Shepard Fairey, whomever is your favorite artist out there, right? Whoever that is, you're not in competition with them. No one's going to look at your art. No one qualified or your friend or an editor is going to look at your art and say, "Oh yeah, that's cool, but did you see what Jim Lee drew last week?" Okay? They will only look at what you did and compare it to the last thing you did. Okay? An editor will say, "Oh wow, you did this. Oh, this is so much better than what you did last time." You get paid by how well you do. Okay? Yes, there is an industry standard, and you should be aware of it. All right? You should be aware of that standard, which comes to my last little art myth for this part one, is you, in order to be an artist, quote unquote, right? Before you can draw construction, before you understand form and color theory, you have to be able to see the difference. You have to be able to see it between something that's, so-called good and not good. And beyond the subjective personal tastes, what I'm trying to get at is you should be able to tell the difference between, how do I explain this? The difference between the reboot CG cartoon and The Incredibles CG movie, right? If you remember the old reboot cartoon, right? Although Reboot is a interesting show and it was fun for back in the day, there is a level of computer quality there, right? There's a level of difference in quality. There's a level of difference in quality between the animation in SpongeBob SquarePants and Beauty and the Beast, right? And the average person can't tell the difference, okay? Or they go, oh, it's not that important. Oh, you're just making a big deal out of it. I used to hear that all the time from my friends. Oh, Rob, you're just making a big deal out of it. It's like, oh, no, this is a higher quality of illustration going on here. This is a far more technical level of mastery going on here, okay? And if you can't tell that difference, right, don't fucking be an artist. Please just save yourself the trouble. Because no one can convince you, no one can teach you taste and quality. I can't do it. No instructor at any school or no my DVD can hand that to you. You need to be able to see the difference. And the reason why I say that is you need to be able to act as your own editor. You need to be able to tell, realistically, if what you're doing is at the level to which would be acceptable for commercial art. All right? And, again, that bar is generally set by editors or deadlines or whatever. I hear all that. But for yourself, you know when you're cheating your audience and when you're not. And if you don't understand what that means, okay, then you haven't matured to the point where you probably should be doing it commercially. I just feel that way. That's my personal feeling. I worked in art departments where many artists just, they don't get it. They don't understand what I'm talking about. And I understand that. I may be off my rocker. I accept a certain level of responsibility that I am wacko, I'm a little out there, okay? But to help you, for you to improve, you have to be able to at least understand where you are at or what you aren't doing and what you would like to do. Because if you draw like 90% of the people online that I see and you think you're illustrating like the top 3%, which would be like a Jim Lee or, if you want to get into like an Alex Ross or you want to get into, these are my comic book, Joe Mad, my personal faves and stuff like that. If you think you're at that level, you're not. I'm just sorry. I'm not, you're not, That's why it's the same like top 3%ers for the last 20 years. It's like pretty much the same people. People come and go, but why do the same top people keep getting the recognition? Because there's a certain level. We're all shooting for those stars. And that's the best part about art, is that it's a continual evolution or movement forward. And I'm still moving forward, and hopefully you as an artist are still moving forward too. And I just think that a lot of these myths and these little like artist bravado rules and regulations that they sort of set for themselves get in the way of actually addressing the real problems with their art. When a lot of times it has to do with the fact that their construction is off, their composition is wrong, or the tone of the piece doesn't fit the audience. They're drawing something that's very graphic and dark for like the Crash Bandicoot cover, or for lack of a better term, go look at the original Mortal Kombat covers that Malibu used to put out back in the day in the 90s. And you'll see that doesn't fit the Mortal Kombat audience at all. So those sorts of things are the real issues. And this how many layers you use and whether you do it for reals or not real, you should always do everything. Always draw with pencil and pen and brush and paint. Always expand whether you understand what you're doing or not. Do it cheaply. Don't spend a lot of money on expensive brushes. Don't spend a lot of money on expensive paints. Try everything, right? And then sort of figure out which one interests you the most and move forward on that path. That's my best advice to you. So this has been the first sketch rant, and certainly not the last. So if you have any questions, concerns, disagreements, yada yada, please, again, email me at rob@sketchcraft, C-R-A-F-T, the name of the podcast, .com, sketchcraft.com. You can also find the podcast at sketchcraft.net directly, but there's links to the website. I'm also on DeviantArt, Facebook. I do commissions from time to time, Right now I'm closed, but they'll be open soon. I also sell prints and stuff like that. All proceeds go to funding the show and conventions and stuff. Not for me buying Nintendo games, bullshit like that. So your support is appreciated. If you like this or hate this, please leave me a rating at iTunes. If you found this on iTunes or you don't know about it, go on iTunes, leave me a rating. I want 1s and 5s. I don't want that 3 shit. You have to love it or hate it. Or hate it or love it, depending on what order. So again, thanks everyone. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.